Welcome back to the Severe MMA Betting Show. It is yours truly, Theo Lander, this time joined by the godfather of Irish MMA media himself. I got the boss on finally. It's Graeme McDonnell. Graeme, thank you for joining me today. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Obviously, I'm not the usual guy for this, but I'll come in and give my wisdom and hopefully win a few bets, but no guarantees.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're just here to have fun, honestly, and it's a good time to remind everybody. Please be responsible with this. Set responsible limits if you are going to ride with us on this one. We're not really here to make a ton of money. We're here just to have a little bit of fun. And of course, if you do need assistance, you can call the hotline, which is 1-800-GAMBLER. But anyways, into this card here, UFC 304 in Manchester. It's actually a great card all around here. A bunch of fun fights, a bunch of people that you'll see a lot on the Severe MMA channel throughout the years. We got a lot of Cage Warriors alumni here. A lot of people from Europe are fighting in this card. Graeme, I want to ask you specifically about this. This is the first time in a long time that we've had three Irish fighters on a UFC card. Just as an Irishman yourself, and you know these people personally as well, pretty well. Does it sort of give you like a sense of pride? Do you feel like we're sort of getting back to the old way that the UFC was back in 2015, where the Irish are sort of taking over the scene, or what do you sort of make of this card?
Yeah, well, over the last year or two, it's definitely a bit of a renaissance of Irish MMA fighters in the UFC, which is obviously where most of them are aiming to be, and there definitely was a bit of a slump there after the Paddy Hoolahans, Carl Penreds, Neil Series, Norman Park. For a while there, we did have like, seven, eight, nine guys in there. And then, gradually they kind of either retired or moved on. And we were kind of left without. And yeah, maybe it's the first time that, well, the first kind of stint that some of these new fans have seen of kind of guys they followed and guys that are coming into the UFC that they've been waiting for to get there and following their careers. So maybe I'm just a bit kind of old and, and jaded, but it is good to see. But I wouldn't say like I'm really excited or anything like that. I'm definitely, it's great to see, and I want to see guys in there, and it makes a card like this much more interesting when you do have the Irish interest. But it doesn't quite feel like the same kind of fairy tale ride yet, anyway, that it did the first kind of generation of Irish guys getting into the UFC. And also because the path was untrodden, there was no there was nobody really had done it before successfully. We'd had Tom Egan and we'd had like Colin Robinson, but they hadn't been successful in the UFC, and they hadn't had a good run in the UFC. So the first time, and the kind of the way it happened with Conor leading it, and the kind of way MMA went from an unknown sport that people kind of didn't like without knowing anything about, to a big deal, to like a major, talking point in Ireland, especially, and, obviously in other countries as well. So I don't know if that kind of specialness and that kind of excitement can be recreated, but you never know. Like Ian Gary, it's a pity in a way about Paul Hughes not being in the UFC, but it's going to be interesting to see what he can do in PFL and hopefully a PFL tournament, the $1 million tournament, and all that. So yeah, it's definitely exciting times for Irish MMA, but I don't know if it's quite, what it was the first time.
Oh yeah, I mean the big difference it feels like with this group is obviously you don't have that supernova of Conor McGregor leading the charge, so there's a bit less fanfare, and people would travel all over the world to watch that guy fight from Ireland. Manchester, if I have my geography correct, Graham, is on the western part of England, correct? Yeah, so it's not that far of a travel for some of these guys who are maybe, going to be traveling domestically. So you've got three people on the card that you want to go see. I know Kalen Loughran had a lot of guys travel to Atlantic City for his last fight. So hopefully you'd imagine they have a bigger turnout here. Manchester's not that far away. But anyways, into the actual card itself here, we have a great matchup at the top of the card between Leon Edwards, Bilal Muhammad. It's a rematch of a fight that happened in 2021 at the UFC Apex. Obviously, we all know it ended very unceremoniously with the eye poke from Bilal Muhammad. Leon felt like he was doing the majority of the work there. And it sort of feels like going into this matchup that he's got all the momentum aside from Bilal Muhammad, who's on this big win streak himself. Graeme, just shortly, tell us what you think about the main event and sort of which way you're leaning here.
Yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards Leon, and probably Leon by decision. He's got great fight IQ. He knows really not to put himself in danger, and he'll probably play it safe against Bilal Muhammad. But if the opportunity does arise, I expect him to take it, but I don't expect him to risk anything to push a finish. But yeah, I do see either Leon, wearing Bilal down and finishing him late, or winning a pretty comprehensive decision. I think that the first matchup, was going that way up until the eye poke, and I think although both guys have improved since, I think Leon has improved more and become more confident, and that champion bounce that people talk about, the extra 20-30% of, like, probably a mind frame thing where he's going in there, and it's another kind of day at the office. But for Bilal Muhammad, it's the biggest fight of his life. It's the revenge. It's the title shot that he probably won't get again if he doesn't win. I think Bilal's really up against it here, especially going into enemy territory. Just all the everything, the style matchup, the previous, the improvements in between the last two fights. I think everything points, in my opinion, towards Leon winning here.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The more that you look at this fight and you look at every facet of it, it feels like Bilal Muhammad really is up against it here. And if you're looking at this from a gambling perspective, and you're sort of looking at the odds here, Bilal Muhammad's a plus 300 underdog, which is great pricing. But for this matchup itself, I feel like he should be a lot higher than that. I would have him priced, in my opinion, closer like to 4 or 500 even. Leon Edwards is just that good. I think he's going to be a lot more comfortable in there to let his hands go than he would have been against Colby Covington, just because Colby is sort of known for putting on a higher pace and shooting a lot of takedowns during that fight. He obviously didn't end up doing that when they fought, so it's a little bit of a different situation. But I do feel the sense that Leon is a lot more settled into himself here now. I really wanted to go with him by finish. I just couldn't bring myself to do it, so I'm going the same way as you here. I have Leon Edwards by decision. The American odds would have that at plus 110. So you could double your money basically on Leon Edwards to win by decision if you wanted to go that way. But on to the co-main event, a fight with major, major heavyweight title implications. It's going to be Tom Aspinall also rematching his foe here, Curtis Blades. Another fight that ended very unceremoniously the last time. I believe they actually matched up in London previously. Tom, obviously, around 10 seconds into the fight, blows out his knee. For some guys, that's a career ender. For Tom Aspinall, he came back better than ever. Graeme, what do you make of that matchup?
Yeah, well, I think maybe 10, 20 years ago, something like that would have been, definitely, if not a career ender, it would have been a major kind of turning point in an athlete's career. But these days, it seems that guys can bounce back from this, and he seems to have bounced back. Getting it early enough in your career, and it probably kind of, if an injury can come at a decent time, it came at a decent time. He was still had a lot of hype behind him and was kind of plugged back into where he was. So he didn't, although he spent a bit of time out, he didn't lose too much, and he looks to have overcome that. And yeah, I think as I mentioned on the SevereMMA podcast with Sean, I think Curtis Blades is a bit of an overrated wrestler. I think because there's basically very few good wrestlers, top wrestlers at heavyweight, that when somebody can wrestle a little bit, like Curtis Blades, not he can wrestle more than a little bit. He knows what he's doing, but he's not some really strong wrestler. I think that's like, if somebody has a hole in their game, yeah, okay, he can probably wrestle them with ease. But I think somebody like a Tom Aspinall is going to be able to handle the wrestling from Curtis Blades, if it even does come, because Curtis Blades, some matchups you think, oh, he can use his wrestling here, and he looks to throw hands. And I think if he does that, it could end very early. Like I'm thinking end of round one, round two KO for Tom Aspinall, and the odds of 7.5. I don't know what the American odds for that is, but 7.5 is pretty big odds for me for round two for Tom Aspinall. But having said that, there, in my opinion, round one KO is probably maybe slightly more likely, but the odds aren't as nice.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the odds for the American odds are it's plus 650. So that's a massive price there. And it's also a great one because I kind of just do feel like Tom Aspinall is the guy right now. He's sort of like the heavyweight of destiny. He's the guy that everyone's clamoring to fight John Jones right now. For whatever reason, and I don't know how you feel about this, Graeme, but I just don't think that the Stipe Miocic fight especially a year removed from when it was supposed to be actually taking place. I feel like that fight's just lost so much steam. I don't really know too many people who are so
Yeah.
interested in that.
I
It's just a
think like
tough
if it
one.
was any other fighter and the way it's been going, it wouldn't be happening. But because John Jones, Dana White's a big fan of John Jones, and John Jones is kind of generational or once in a lifetime or whatever. He's a unique athlete. So I think maybe because of the legacy of Stipe Miocic being the winningest, as John Anik would say, heavyweight champion in terms of title defenses, John Jones will want to take that so he can say, well, I beat the best ever heavyweight. I beat the best ever. I am the best ever light heavyweight. So it'd be a nice kind of addition to his championship legacy. So I think John Jones will really push for that, and that might make it happen. Just because of John Jones is in a unique position compared to 99% of UFC fighters. But the longer it goes, Stipe is not getting any younger either. I think Tom Aspinall having the interim belt has led to what you're saying, a kind of clamor for him to fight, and it's kind of left Tom in a weird position. It's not his fault. He's going to offer the interim title fight. He's obviously going to take it. He went in there and won. Nothing he did. But when the UFC are kind of already talking about, oh, we're going to put together, or we're looking potentially to put together this Stipe John Jones fight, and there's an interim champion waiting, it does leave you with problems that you didn't need.
Yeah, no, I echo your sentiment 100% there. Just back to the picks here quickly. I am taking Tom Aspinall, not by any specific round, but I am taking him to finish Curtis Blades by TKO or KO, and that's coming out around minus 150 for the American odds. So it's a great fight. I can't wait to see it. And yeah, I think you're 100% right there. I think Curtis Blades is a guy who everyone sort of views as the boogeyman wrestler of the heavyweight division. He is a wrestle heavy guy, but I just don't think that his wrestling is going to be as effective as people anticipate it to be. On to a next one. This is a very interesting fight here. Paddy Pimblett is going to go up against newly named King Green. This is one of those fights that I have been waiting for so long. Ever since Paddy came into the UFC, I feel like I kind of had, the inside on Paddy because I had seen him in Cage Warriors, and that's sort of how everyone who watches him in Cage Warriors feels. Like they feel like they have him figured out as like kind of the fighter that he is. Whereas if you're just a UFC fan, you only watch the main cards. You don't really know Paddy's history. And so you just kind of see this guy that the UFC is pushing. You kind of just assume that he's great. Not to take anything away from Paddy Pimblett, I just think that the parts of his game that haven't developed, specifically his striking defense, are what's going to come back to bite him here. And I just feel like King Green, is the perfect guy to expose those things. Excellent hand
Is
movement.
he the perfect guy though? Because
Stylistically, yes, we
yeah,
don't know what Bobby Green's going to turn
the
up
problem with
though.
Bobby, yeah, exactly. The problem, exactly what I was going to say. The inconsistency of Bobby Green. If he can put it together and get flowing, he can put shots on you. But if he gets frustrated and starts trying to, talk to you, even though he's losing, or he gets taken down, and instead of trying to get up, he's trying to trash talk. With Bobby Green or King Green or whatever it is, you can never know what you're getting, and he has finishes, finishes on the feet, but he's not really a KO guy. And although Paddy Pimblett's defensive striking has been a problem compared to the rest of his game, and you would think, oh, this is going to catch up with you sooner or later, and it probably will. But I don't know if Bobby Green is the guy to put somebody down with one shot. And if you drop Paddy Pimblett and he's still aware, is Bobby Green going to want to follow him down there? If he can create some kind of, sweep or create some kind of scramble and, grab a top position, that's exactly where Paddy Pimblett wants to be. So, yeah, I think I know what you're saying. Like, depending on which Bobby Green shows up, it could be a nightmare style matchup, or, Paddy Pimblett could get a takedown and Bobby Green could kind of, get frustrated and start, talking shit instead of working to get up. So, with any Bobby Green fight, it's a hard one to call. That's why I just stayed away from. I'd expect it to be probably a really close decision either way. That people who like Paddy are going to be saying it was his, and the people who don't like Paddy are going to be saying it's a robbery. That's the kind of fight I think this is going to end up being. So from a betting perspective, that's a very hard one to be confident with. But yeah, if Bobby Green does turn up, then it could be a different story.
Yeah, 100%. And, it is important to mention that you really don't know what kind of Bobby Green is going to show up. This is a guy who, one fight he'll look like a world beater. The next fight, it looks like he sort of withers away there. If there's any fight that you're going to get up for and get ready for and be motivated for. It's a fight against Paddy Pimblett on the main card of a UFC pay-per-view across sea in enemy territory. I think especially a guy like Bobby Green responds well to those type of circumstances. So I think you actually did the smart thing here in staying away from this fight. I did the opposite. I went Bobby Green to finish Paddy Pimblett via KO in the first round, which is at plus 1,500. So if you put
Mhm.
$1 on it, you win $15. So yeah, sometimes fortune favors the brave. I have gone this route in the past on this show. It has come back to bite me pretty hard. So yeah, maybe it'll happen this time, maybe not. Who knows? But on to another fight on this card. You actually have a pick for the Molly McCann fight versus Bruna Brazil. I stayed away from this fight, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it's a harder matchup than the odds say for Molly. I think she's going to win, but I think it's going to be close enough rounds, and it's going to be probably 29-28 or 30-27 for Molly, and there'd probably be a couple of hairy moments in there. Like Bruno Brazil is a little bit underrated in my opinion, and maybe Molly McCann's a little bit overrated. So I see this being probably a Molly decision, but I don't see the odds being as wide as they are. But I wouldn't have confidence in picking against Molly, but I don't see it being a cakewalk like a lot of people seem to think it's going to be.
Yeah, no, definitely not an easy fight for Molly by any means, and that's why I stayed away from it. But I do like the way she looks at this new weight class. I do like her fighting in her home country as well. So all those things would maybe point towards her. But like
Yeah,
you said,
what, 20 minutes down the road from Liverpool for Paddy and Molly here in the Manchester, arena. So they'll definitely have a huge support behind them. And it's not like they've sold out like Cage Warriors Liverpool before. They've been in big shows where it's not going to be a kind of distraction or a moment where they're going to get lost in it. They're well used to this stuff, so that's definitely something to take into account.
yeah, 100%. This is where someone like Molly or Patty would be most comfortable is in these high hype fights on their home turf. But like you said, Bruna Brazil is super underrated, so I definitely don't want to count her out by any stretch of the means. So I did stay away from this one. But another fight here that I also stayed away from, but you are going to play something on, is the Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze fight. Graeme, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I went for Arnold Allen inside the distance. I think Arnold Allen, like, he's looked phenomenal recently. Obviously, going in there against one of the very, legends of the division, and losing was kind of expected. It's obviously there's a big step up there to do upper echelon, but I think when he kind of steps down to this level, it could be a dominant decision, but I see him maybe, if he doesn't get it done with the kind of early pressure that he likes to put on, I see him, grinding it down and maybe getting like a late TKO or a late submission. I'm pretty confident in Arnold Allen getting this done inside the distance at 4.0, which is what, plus 300, is it? Or plus 500?
Yep, it is plus 300 for
Plus
that
300.
finish. So it's actually a great price there. I actually might take that myself. But um, moving on here, we have an Irishman on your card is one Kalen Loughran, a bantamweight who I'm very high on. For the second time in his UFC career, he's going to have to take on a short notice replacement. But this time, it's someone we're very familiar with. It's Jake Hadley. Graeme, tell us about this matchup. What do you think about Kalen's rise so far in the UFC, and how do you see this one going?
Yeah, as you mentioned, he's had a couple of pullouts and late replacements already, and in the UC debut it didn't quite work out. We kind of he went from a favorable matchup to a very difficult matchup, and came out on the wrong end of it. But it wasn't a blowaway. He definitely showed he belonged, and went in there and got the win in his next one, and kind of really got his feet under the table. And for Jake Hadley, it's he got in there, got a couple of wins after a debut loss, and since then he's lost two in a row. So this is kind of could be make or break for Jake Hadley. And after his last fight, I was talking with Sean on the podcast, and they're kind of saying he's able to do everything, Jake Hadley, but it's the in between bits. It's the making the right decisions at the right time, and getting between the different disciplines that seems to be a missing ingredient in his game. But if he can get it, if Hadley can get it into the positions that he's strong in, we've seen him in the past. We've seen him in Cage Warriors. Like you don't go all the way in Cage Warriors, and get into the UFC through Contender Series if you're not a good fighter. So this is, in my opinion, a more difficult matchup than Caden's original opponent. It's not quite as difficult as the change for his UFC debut, but it's definitely not easy. And now, Caelan's going in there where he's against a hometown guy, and it's going to be all that we've seen in France before, that he doesn't mind that. He'll play it up. He'll speak his mind. So it's probably not going to affect him. But I think it's definitely, it's good that it's another southpaw. If Caelan's gone through a camp, preparing for a southpaw, and all of a sudden you're going in there against an orthodox fighter. But Jake Hadley's definitely a different style matchup than he was expecting. But having kind of been in the Cage Wars promotion at the same time and kind of come up at a similar time, I think he probably knows a lot about Jake Hadley already, which will, I'm sure it swings both ways. I'm sure Jake Hadley knows all about Caelan Loughran as well. And yeah, I think it's a really good matchup. I think especially on short notice, I'm very happy with this matchup. I'm happier with this matchup than I was with the original matchup. But I think Caelan's going to have too much here. I think, we've seen Caelan, be able to win rounds. We've seen him be able to, display grappling and takedowns and offensive striking. And maybe, people talk about needing to move his head more and, defensive striking. But I don't think Jake Hadley's really the man to punish him for that at this stage. I think, maybe somebody with really big knockout power, which is rare enough at these divisions, will be able to expose that in Caelan's game if Caelan doesn't improve it as he climbs the ranks. But yeah, I think it'll be a good matchup and maybe end up being a decision with some close rounds. But I think Caelan is going to win on points, probably 30-27. He could drop a round in there, but I think it's very unlikely that he's going to drop 2 rounds.
Yeah, I'm with you on the way on that. I'm really high on Caelan, like I said earlier. I'm excited to see how he plays into the crowd here. I feel like, Manchester is sort of like a second home for him, but the English fans, I feel, aren't going to be too kind to Caelan. I imagine he's going to have a lot of support coming over because it's not that long of a journey like we were talking about earlier. But yeah, I'm just excited for this fight in general. I think his pressure is going to be too much for his opponent to handle here, Jake Hadley. Credit to Hadley for taking it on short notice, but it's quite the risk to go against a guy like Caelan Loughran without too much preparation. So yeah, I'm sort of really with you all the way on that. So real quick, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring up my card because I have 2 more that I want to highlight real quickly here. Kiefer Crosby, SBG fighter. We're very familiar with him. He had a really tough draw against his first opponent in the UFC. He had to take it on 2 weeks' notice and fly across the world to Australia for that fight. Ended up not going his way. And he really wasn't, in his own words, he wasn't training as much. He was in a bad place. He wasn't really in proper fight shape. Now he's been dialed in since then. He's rearing, ready to go. And the pictures of media day, he looks like he's in excellent, excellent shape. And I think this matchup plays perfectly into his hand. Sam Patterson is the guy I think you have to crowd. And I think that Kiefer Crosby is going to be able to make this a dogfight. And I honestly see this going maybe to the distance or a late finish for Kiefer Crosby, but him to win at plus 340 was staring me in the face, and I couldn't refuse to take that, Graeme. What do you think about the matchup?
Yeah, like it's definitely not as you said, a big ask as late notice, not even in fight shape, going over to Australia to fight a guy. Obviously, that's a bigger task, but I don't think this is not no easy draw either. This is a difficult fight. This is a guy who went through Brave, and if you know anything about Brave, there's no real kind of oh, we're going to build you up here. We're going to give you the progression of fights. They just kind of throw you in there. You're in there. All of us, 1 minute you're fighting a 2-3 guy, the next minute you're fighting like a 9-3 or a 14-1, or it's steep. It's a steep learning curve, and obviously, he got his place through Contender Series with a nice rear naked choke, and ended up losing his UFC debut, but kind of got his feet under the table, as I said earlier, with a nice rear naked choke in the first round. So, I think Kiefer has to get this done early. I think he has to come out, all guns blazing in the first round and make this a war. And we all know he has good power, and we saw what happened against Alex Cowboy Oliveira. We know what Kiefer can do, but I think if I was in Sam Patterson's corner, I'd be looking at how did Kiefer lose the last time? On the ground, rear naked choke, that kind of thing. I think that that could be a thing that if this isn't going well for Sam Patterson on the feet, he's going to look to turn to that. But the longer stays on the feet, I think Kiefer obviously has a very good chance of landing something big. He's a accomplished kickboxer, and he's shown even in his what was it, like was it Misfits or one of them
boxing? Kingpin boxing.
Kingpin, yeah. He's able to box, he's able to kickbox, But I think guys are going to be looking at it going, maybe I don't want to do this for too long. But yeah, it could be a case where if Kiefer can, get a shot off early, he definitely has the killer instinct. We've seen it before as he's come up. Once he smells blood, he's able to put guys away. But this is another very difficult matchup, in my opinion. This is a guy who's Sam Patterson, who's maybe been flying under the radar because he hadn't gone through the Cage Warriors or the Bellator route, and in Brave, maybe there's not much fanfare or promotion this side in America or even in Europe around these fights. But if you're looking at the guys he's fought and beat and finished, these are some very good guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are no easy fights in the UFC. We've watched long enough to know that. But I'm just excited to see Kiefer Crosby here on a full cap. I think he's going to look a lot better than his first fight. And yeah, I am riding with him despite all of that. But on to my next one here. Shauna Bannon is taking on another late replacement here on this card, is Alice Allardine, someone who kind of
People are
got
mad.
people are very upset about this one because her record is not impressive. She's just been labeled as a TikTok star. She's faced some very legit
In fairness,
competition
the
as
TikTok thing is, she was fighting many, many years ago before TikTok even existed. So I think it is
yeah,
a bit unfair to label her with that, even though, you could look at it and say she's crushed a few cans recently and she shouldn't be in the UFC at this age. But, this is not a meritocracy. If you can bring interest and the UFC think you can bring interest, like, nobody, CM Punk didn't earn his way. This is, I know people got mad about that as well, but this is part of the business. This is not a league structure like the Premier League or the other meritocracy sports. This is the UFC. This is prize fighting where the fights that are going to get the most interest and maybe bring a different audience are going to be tried out. And yeah, like I've no problem with, well, maybe like if I could make the rules, I probably wouldn't do it, but I'm so used to it that I've no problem with it.
yeah. I mean, the sooner that you realize that the UFC is about prize fighting and not meritocracy, the better off you'll be. This is not anything new. This is sort of how they've always chugged along here. But specifically on this pick, I want to highlight Shauna Bannon here. She's someone who historically has gotten better and better and better between fights. Like you can actually see her progression through the fights more than other fighters. So she's had a bit of a long layoff since her last one. It didn't go her way in the debut. And now she's taking on this short nosed opponent who, again, people are highly discounting, which I don't think is all that fair, to be honest with you. But regardless, everything is pointing towards a Shauna Bannon victory here. So that's why I went with her. Now, Graeme, real quick, you do have an additional one here. Tell us about the Welsh gangster, Oban Elliott.
Yeah, I think Oban Elliott, obviously is another guy that we've been watching for a long time, come up through Cage Warriors. We saw him against James Sheehan, we've seen him against guys who we kind of know exactly where their level is. And, maybe if people don't watch Contender Series or watch Cage Warriors and just saw his UFC debut, they'd say, oh, well, like, he got the win, but he wasn't that impressive. And, he'd probably admit himself that it wasn't the best performance of his career, but he's able to come. We've seen him overcome adversity. He's willing to die on his shield. We've seen it out there. He'll never stop. He's sometimes you can make up for a lot with real push and desire and heart, and we've seen that from him. So that's something that I always like to have in a guy, especially a guy who's likely to go to a lot of decisions at the top level. I don't think he's a big finisher. So obviously, there's no easy fights in the UFC, as you said. Val Warburn's a good fighter, and even with a bit of UFC debut jitters and maybe not on his full game. I thought he still looked good. I think people were overcritical of his performance, and I think he definitely deserved to win that fight and won it handily. And his opponent is definitely a guy who's had some high level fights, but I think stylistically, Oban Elliott can take it to different realms and be comfortable. And I think he's just more well rounded and has more heart and will, if the technique isn't working out, will be able to grind and eke out rounds when he needs to, and has a good fight IQ for that and understands how rounds are. Sometimes we don't go, we see guys and they get a leg takedown and this is a razor close round where no big strikes have been landed, and they don't posture up and try to land those big shots that could steal the round. But I think he's a guy who understands exactly what the judging criteria is and what the judges are looking for and how to take these rounds if he needs to, and he's willing to, we've seen him hurt and willing to come forward and put his body on the line. And maybe because I've been following him in Cage Warriors and because that's my kind of fighter that I like, or maybe I'm a bit biased towards him. But I think there's a lot more to come from him than we saw in his UFC debut. Even in his Contender Series fight, I think he's a guy who, like you mentioned, Sean, earlier, who's improving fight to fight and who will have gone back and looked at that UFC debut and will do things a lot better. And I think, the price for him to win on points is just, huge for me. I think, like, if I had to predict how this fight is going to go anyway, I think the most likely thing is Oban Elliott by decision. So having it at 3.75, I definitely think that's a good bet.
Yeah, definitely some great pricing there. Always good to see Oban in the cage. Always a good fighter to watch there. Okay, so on to the team parlay now. Graham, I don't know if you know this, but this is a historic team parlay for us. This is the highest priced parlay that we have ever had. It comes in.
It's because of you. That's because of you.
It's because
Look at
of
your
me. Yeah.
plus 550 in the middle there, Jesus.
Yeah, Ian O'Neill's gone on getting married. I've gotten a little reckless in his absence,
When
but
I do parlays, I try to play it super safe because I always get screwed at some stage. Like,
absolutely. Absolutely. So we are reaching for the stars here, Graham, but I will let you know that there has been 4 occasions since we've been doing the show that Ian and I have disagreed on picks that end up on the parlay, and we win 75% of those times. So perhaps all is not lost here already. Graham, real quick, give me a 60-second summary of your top 2 picks at the top of this parlay: Edwards money line, and then of course
yeah.
Aspinall by TK or
Well,
DQ.
as I said, I think Leon's going to win. It's just I'm kind of undecided about whether he's going to win inside the distance or by decision. So I think it's pretty safe there, 1.47 for him to win straight up on the money line. And then obviously Tom Aspinall, I think he's going to get it done probably the first or the second round. So I don't see it going to the 4th or the 5th anyway. I don't see it going late. I think there's a lot of power going around at heavyweights, especially between these two, especially with Tom. So I think if he puts on the performance, I think he will. I think that's a pretty good, like, if it hits the ground, maybe it could be a different story, and it could get dragged out. But yeah, I really don't think so. I really think Tom Aspinall early here is going to be probably a TKO. I think last minute of the first round or first couple of minutes of the second round.
Yeah, absolutely here. And of course, my bold pick of the week is for some reason in this team parlay, but I still feel really good about is Green to finish by either TKO or KO at plus 550. Again, this is something that we've been anticipating for years. Paddy Pimblett, when he gets that extra step up in competition against a competent striker, of course, which version of Green will show up? I think for this particular matchup and this assignment, he's going to give it his all. So very confident in Bobby Green
I say
here.
you'll be able to hear a pin drop after if this happens.
Exactly. Exactly. So after that, Tom Aspinall is going to have to bring the arena back up here for our parlay to keep going. So it'll be a good ending of the night for the British, but we are anticipating some sad people in the arena around probably 3 or 4 a.m. by the time that fight kicks off. Who knows? Shauna Bannon, of course, we touched on her earlier. Ton of momentum for her going into this fight because she had that long layoff. She's going to be much better going in here against a short notice opponent who a lot of people are sort of undersizing against Shauna. But yeah, this is going to pay out $21.70 if you place $1 on it. Want to remind everyone at home, please, please, please do so responsibly. Again, we're just having fun with this here. Don't blame me if a Bobby Green KO does not come to fruition.
Only bet what you can afford to lose and assume you're going to
Exactly.
lose it.
Exactly. Assume you're going to lose. If you're going out for a night out and you're saying I'm willing to spend X amount, that's how you should also treat this stuff too. So absolutely set your limits. But yeah, thank you, Graeme, for stepping in for Ian O'Neill. I really appreciate it. As far as I'm concerned, Ian can go get married every month for the rest of his life, and I'll still have someone here to do the show with. So we'll
Don't
be
tell
all
his
good.
wife.
Don't tell his wife. Yeah. Congratulations to him and her, by the way. Great to have you on, Graeme. Really appreciate the time. And of
Cheers for
course,
having me.
everyone, please be responsible and enjoy the fights on Saturday night.